everyone, welcome to this week's live stream with the Bomb Money team. Today we are going to be continuing our series discussing and debunking crypto myths. So we're excited to get into this today. As always, we're very happy to take any questions or comments as we go. So definitely just pop those in. And if you're watching this back and you've got questions or there's anything that you'd like us to cover in future videos, then definitely just pop those in the comments and we'll make sure to cover them in the videos. So yeah, I think we'll just jump straight in if that's okay with you guys. Awesome. Good. So the first myth, and I think this is one that we all probably have heard many a time, is that cryptocurrencies are a fad and they don't actually have any true underlying value. Aaron, let's kick it over to you. What do you think about that one?
You got to put the pressure on me after I've gotten really any sleep. Somebody else want to give that one a shot?
Yeah, well, I can kick off with some initial thoughts and then you guys feel free to jump in. I mean, I think that during a bull run when prices are soaring and at all-time highs, or at least approaching them, everyone's very excited about crypto. I remember in my old job, colleagues were talking about the latest meme coins that they bought and everything was awesome. Contrast that to now. Based on a recent survey of the US population, 9% of the US have a favorable view of crypto. And I guess that's not particularly surprising, right? After the implosions of FTX, Celsius, the negative media coverage that we've seen, and just generally prices declining, it's understandable, right? That unless you're really in the know, you understand the fundamentals, the use cases of key cryptos, you probably are at this stage in the market cycle going to have a bit of a negative view. So I think that's something that plays into things. And I also think that on the point around people having the perception that crypto doesn't have any kind of underlying value, a lot of that is to do with people just not understanding the fundamentals of crypto. A lot of people, I always say, my dad, he says to me, well, all of these thousands of cryptos, they're never going to be the next global currency. So what's the point of them? And actually, as we all know, cryptos have lots of different use cases, often within specific ecosystems, and don't necessarily have any desire to be the next global reserve currency. So I think helping people understand the sort of core use cases of cryptos just general education on the overall uptrend, right, that we know there's been over the longer term is key to dispelling that myth. So yeah, that's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree what you said there with not necessarily becoming a full currency, and I don't think anybody's expecting it to take over as like a global currency. And it's similar to people that buy and hold bars of gold. Like, what purpose do those have other than a store of value? Except you're just holding physical gold, right? Except here, you don't actually have to store anything physically, so it's a lot easier with crypto.
Yeah, but I could see where your father was coming from though with that comparison though, because someone that just barely knows anything about crypto would maybe understand Bitcoin or a little bit about Bitcoin. So then to hear that there's thousands of other coins, without knowing about programmable smart contracts and all the different things that a crypto can do, you would just think that there's just 1,000 different Bitcoins that are just not as good, right? And that's easy to see how that would be the assumption.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even with Bitcoin, when people do wrap their head around, some of Bitcoin's primary use cases, even then they're sort of confused as to, the whole piece around self-custody. Lots of people, especially in Western countries, just don't really care about that because they trust banks. They're sort of like, well, it's fine. My funds are safe and secure, blah, blah, blah. And then when you perhaps, Satan will think about other, countries where folk genuinely haven't been able to gain access to their funds because, banks put holds on their funds or, there's civil unrest at sort of mass scale. I think often that's when people go, okay, actually, being able to truly custody my own assets and, no one, no government, nobody be able to confiscate that. People start to sort of begin to wrap their heads around, okay, maybe I see the value.
Hey, one of the first things you said, Rob, when you mentioned the percentage of people that I think was optimistic about crypto, what was that number that you said?
Yeah, 9% of the favorable view. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because I read within the last month or two that over or 20% of Americans hold some form of crypto, whether it's Bitcoin or an altcoin or something, right? So
doesn't necessarily mean they're positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have dipped their toes in the water during the last bull run, perhaps haven't, sold all of it, and they're just upset about the fact that
this may have even included people that have sold, maybe just people that have owned it at one point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought 20 was pretty high though, but I guess it is the United States they were talking about, so it's.
Yeah, well, I've actually got some crypto adoption stats in front of me from Gemini. Let's see how that's maybe not the best source, but let's see how that contrasts. So US, 20%, exactly what you outlined. Interestingly, according to this, the highest is in Singapore, and then countries like Denmark, you've only got 15%.
What's the highest? So, what's Singapore at?
30%. And then according to crypto.com's recent-ish stats, they believe that there's around 425 million crypto holders globally.
Okay. And if you think that there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and not everybody in the world can have even a fraction of a Bitcoin, but yeah, even 100th. So when you start thinking of scarcity and supply and demand, Bitcoin, it's not one of those cryptos that just continually prints like Doge, for example. But there's always going to be a finite number of Bitcoin, and with billions of people battling over those few amounts, the demand is going to continue to grow.
Well, in the future, we'll be talking about Bitcoins in sats or whatever, right? The smallest,
smallest
measurement. To have a whole Bitcoin will be just only for the mega rich.
100%, yeah. Again, I'm not going to say I know for certain that these are particularly accurate, but 56.1 million millionaires apparently. So there's not even enough for each millionaire to hold one Bitcoin. So that just emphasizes that.
And that doesn't even include all the coins that have been lost, and it's Bitcoin being around as long as it has been. Man.
Well, and so that's part of it, is that a lot of Bitcoin's been lost, but you also have a lot of institutions that hold thousands, or early whales that still hold thousands of Bitcoin. So there actually is not 21 million ever going to be available for everybody. It's probably more like
not even close.
12 to 15 million that the general public are going to be fighting over.
I think that's even probably a high estimate.
Yeah.
I think no matter how much money in the world you had, you couldn't buy more than 5 million Bitcoins.
Yeah.
No matter what you were willing to drive the price to.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Cool. But yeah, I think in summary, around the sort of myth of cryptos are a fad and don't have value, is it a myth? I think the answer is very much a yes, for the reasons that we've talked about. But I think, the sheer complexity of crypto, at least for the general population, means that it's kind of hard for people to get their head around what the true sort of value is. And clearly that's one of the things we're focused on here at Bond Money, is making crypto as accessible and easy as possible. And obviously part of that is how we educate people about the underlying value of the assets that we offer.
And we're continuously coming up with new ways to improve user experience, just to give that Web 2 feel and really accommodate the users.
Yeah, 100%.
And speaking of, hello, Michelle. Speaking of, cryptocurrency being a fad, I think there's been multiple times throughout its short history where people have thought that, and it's always been proven wrong. So like in 2013, 2017, it continues. It's just a fad. It's going to die. And it continued to recover. And there would be a massive bull run once the sentiment started getting on that. But now I think it's more than ever becoming more sure that it's not a fad. because not just cryptocurrencies, but the blockchain technology in general is being adopted in some of the industries that you would never think to associate with just a decade ago. So you're looking at healthcare starting to adapt blockchain technology into their supply chain. You're looking at shipping companies, all these different industries now that are worth billions. These Fortune 500 companies are now starting to integrate blockchain into their technology. So if they would think it's a fad, they would not be investing billions of dollars to building this infrastructure and improving their infrastructure using blockchain.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, you've got JP Morgan, using blockchain for settlement of transactions, albeit in the sort of early stages, but they've got a dedicated, I think they call a lab, effectively a team dedicated to blockchain technology now. You've got the likes of EY, one of the big four consulting and accounting firms, working very closely with Polygon on, institutional adoption. So yeah, it's firmly here to stay, not just for individuals, but for institutions as well.
Yeah, to go off on a slight tangent, kind of reminds me of what Vitalik Buterin said about just about like the bull and bear markets and the cycles that we've seen. And, as it becomes more and more sure that, when we are in a bear cycle, that it's going to recover. He said, like, the variation between the low of the bear and the, the top of the bull market is going to keep shrinking and shrinking because people are just going to start buying every time it drops because recovery is inevitable. So I think with each cycle, it's, as it becomes more obvious it's not a fad, then, we're going to have less volatility.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, a great way just to really give yourself the confidence in that, if you are new and going, I don't know, it feels a bit scary dipping my toe in the water, is if you just go to the Bitcoin chart, put it on a logarithmic view, switch it to monthly, weekly, or whatever, and, you'll see that the trend is firmly up and to the right. And in the grand scheme of things, these big dips in each of the bear markets, actually, when you zoom out, are actually nothing in the grand scheme of things. Cool. All right. Anything else you guys had on that before we move on to crypto myth number 2?
Hey, Captain Hindsight. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for coming along.
I think we can move on.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So the next one is interesting. Because I guess there's some degree of truth in this, and it's crypto is anonymous and untraceable. And I guess some people think, that's completely the case. So let's unpack that. And I think, Aaron, you're well placed for this one to kick us off.
Yeah. So I think, people have to just understand a little bit about how blockchains work. It's essentially a ledger of transactions. There's no name attached to, your transactions in that ledger, but your unique wallet address, which may or may not be associated with you through different means, that's publicly visible, right? So it's something where if at any time somebody's associated your wallet address, which is like, a random string, almost a unique address, if that's been associated with your identity, now it's almost like somebody's seen your bank records, like somebody could see every little thing that you've ever done on that wallet. So, in that sense, it's not a, complete privacy, but if that wallet's not associated with your name, then, it's a random individual controlling a wallet doing something, right?
Yeah, completely. And generally it's the case that, people onboard fiat currency and offboard it via centralized exchange and not where you've been through KYC. So not the case, obviously, that you or I could identify someone's wallet ID to the person who's been KYC'd on the centralized exchange. But in terms of a government, for example, if they were to dig deep enough, then there is that sort of traceability as well. And we'll get on to this as our next myth, actually, around crypto only being used for illicit activity, which clearly isn't the case.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I'll touch on that just a tiny bit, and just, based on what you just said about, when you on-ramp from an exchange, and that exchange, you've KYC'd at and they know who you are. Essentially, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, you can basically be anonymous just by, sending funds from an exchange to some new wallet that you've just created and do whatever you please. It's only, if you're up to illegal activities that, you being known at the exchange is ever going to become an issue. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, precisely. If you're keeping everything above board, is clearly
the exchange has no reason to.
Then yeah, it's really nothing to worry about. But I guess just plays into the fact it's not the case that in all cases you're truly anonymous, and there are more sort of specialized coins that are out there, in the privacy coin realm that we'll not get too deep into today, but they have some fairly sort of sophisticated measures that involve not using the same address for each transaction. That just gives you that additional degree of anonymity.
And I'll just add, though, that it is a myth that crypto is anonymous and untraceable to some extent. But if you keep everything within crypto, as you're saying, and you never disclose your address, there's all these sites that you can go or Twitter accounts you can follow, like Whale Watcher, and you can just see transactions of hundreds of millions of dollars being sent to somebody, and nobody knows who sent it and nobody knows who received it. So as long as those wallets haven't actually been attributed to a person, nobody knows who's sending or receiving those crazy amounts of crypto. But when it comes, and so this used to be the case also, bringing it off into US dollars or Canadian dollars into fiat off ramp, people used to also remain anonymous. And of course, governments are cracking down on that now. So it's really hard now to convert Bitcoin into your local currency without actually disclosing who you are and who owns what wallet. But just if you keep everything within Bitcoin, you can find somebody to sell you things in Bitcoin. Or if actually there are some places I forget which town it is. I think it's Richmond Hill, close to Toronto, where I live. And they actually had a pilot program where you could pay your taxes in Bitcoin. So that's a pretty cool thing. But my guess is that the idea behind something like that would be to tie your Bitcoin address to who's sending it, right? So you can start saying, oh, Marcus paid me in Bitcoin. Oh, let's see what else his holdings are and what he's been up to. But yeah, I think there will be more mass adoption towards things like that, where you can start paying things directly in Bitcoin, directly in crypto. And if you are able to maintain anonymity with that wallet, then it is virtually impossible to tell who's sending who what.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Cool. All right. I think we've kind of naturally started getting into the next myth, which is that crypto is only used for illicit purposes. What's that?
Yeah, I said, wait, that's not true.
That's what I'm using it for. Kidding.
Not to get that in. But what do you guys think in all seriousness? Because some people, especially those who are opposed to crypto, do sort of really major on this one, saying, well, if there is that ability to remain largely anonymous, it must mainly be criminals that are interested in it, right?
I mean, I think the reason that this is even a myth is that, it's almost like in the news, you'll see more stories about murders than about someone getting married, right? Like people like to report on negative things, and that gets more, people buy their newspaper more often. And, when anything, illegal happens that has something to do with crypto, or they use crypto to facilitate the payment, that's front and center. Bitcoin used to steal whatever, or computer, hack, requires 2 million in Bitcoin to, whatever it might be. And, I think just because of the news, that's why, people just, when they heard about crypto, it was often because of a crime, right? Or, or if you go back to like Silk Road, right. The dark web marketplace where you could basically buy whatever you wanted, that was all, all the transactions were done in crypto. And, that was becoming a big problem before. So a lot of people heard about that. And just with that, payments being forced to be done through crypto, I think a lot of people just made that connection without realizing all of the other use cases and benefits of using crypto for legitimate purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Media, governments do very much reinforce the narrative that crypto is used for illicit purposes, and I guess to some extent that's because crypto at its core threatens the financial system as we know about it. If anyone watched Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, testifying over the course of the last couple of days, he was asked, I think, on at least a couple of occasions what his and the Fed's opinion was on crypto. And he absolutely highlighted that, there's huge value in the technology, that innovation mustn't be stifled, etc. But he did, anytime it was mentioned, refer to recent fraud. Yeah, clearly referring to FTX and probably Terra as well. So, that doesn't help, shall we say, when these prominent public figures, make such a point of emphasizing the small number of unfortunate instances where there has been negative goings on with crypto.
Yeah, there's actually stats from Chain Analysis, a company that investigates cryptocurrency crimes within blockchain. And they said that in 2021, only 0.15% of all cryptocurrency transactions were used for illicit activities. And I don't have the stats on that, but it's probably lower than cash for illicit activities, because you just... The other thing, as we were talking about, there is still some sort of traceability for crypto transactions, not entirely anonymous, but there's always going to be a trail of some sort for those transactions.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think people often forget that, cash is heavily used in criminal activity.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything that has large-scale adoption is unfortunately going to be used in some way for criminal activity. Cool. Anything else you guys want to add on that one then?
Yeah, speaking of criminal activity, another one that struck close to home here was in Ottawa. There was that trucker rally during the protest for the mandates, right? And they started transferring and funding all the activities with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I won't get into whether or not it was illegal or not, but the government did deem it illegal, and they actually froze 34 crypto wallets that contained all of this Bitcoin that was being used to support the trucker convoy. Mm-hmm. So, that's just kind of the media kind of elaborated on that story, talking about how Bitcoin's used for all this illegal activity. So again, it's that narrative there saying this is the only thing that Bitcoin's used for, is to support things when you can't actually send cash to these to the truckers because that was all frozen. So they started sending Bitcoin, and that's just kind of the narrative that the media will always try and show with crypto.
They like to sensationalize things, so they'll always grab the stats that show what they want to show, even though they're much smaller than what they actually are trying to prove.
100%. So I think in conclusion, it's firmly a myth that crypto is only used for illicit activity. As a whole host of use cases that we talked about earlier. And yes, there will be some small proportion that is used for criminal activity.
Just like every other service and product in the world, if a criminal can make use of it, then they will.
Yeah. No, spot on. All right, let's push on to our next myth then, and that. This one is digital currencies and crypto. They're all Ponzi schemes. Who wants to kick us off on that?
I'll just start with defining a Ponzi scheme is very important. When people throw the word Ponzi scheme out for a lot of things, but Ponzi is taking somebody's money and promising a return on that, and then paying that return by taking in other people's money. That's a Ponzi scheme. Where with crypto, for the majority, it's a matter of supply and demand. So people are, and it works the exact same as real estate or stocks. You're purchasing an asset in the hopes that you can then sell it later when there's higher demand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a Ponzi scheme, because you're not promising any returns. There's none of that actual Ponzi happening.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. People sometimes forget just how markets work in general, right? As you say, to profit from an asset, you're dependent on someone being willing to pay a higher price. It probably doesn't help, right, that there are undoubtedly some projects, especially in the DeFi space, that are Ponzi's, like oh god, I've had a complete mind blank. Like these baked beans protocols. Yes, yeah, and they basically are right, just gathering in funds and promising a really high APR and distributing new users' funds to those that got in earlier. But yeah, in terms of crypto as a whole, that's typically not the case, right? So yeah, not to be confused. Cool. All right, I think that's a fairly simple one to cover off. Okay, but yeah, be mindful because there are the odd Ponzi out there, especially in the DeFi world. But clearly, with us at Bond Money, we're very focused on delivering sustainable returns, and through our mobile app, that's firmly the case.
Actually, so, yeah. Quick beginner tip on identifying Ponzi's is when you'll see, and a lot of them happen with NFTs now. So somebody will sell you an NFT and say, this will return 1% a day or whatever. And the returns are generally just crazy and unrealistic, right? But all they do is that for the first 100 days, they're just paying you back with the money you purchased from them. So they have 100 days to collect as much as they can. And then usually you'll never hear from the company again. So when you see something like that, and that was what happened with Stable Fund, they were promising 1.5% a day, and people poured millions in because the early folks, they are getting that 1% a day, right? 1.5% a day. But it's once that runs out, or once the company decides they have enough funds, then they pull the rug and you've lost your funds. So it's very important to do some research, trust the people you're investing with, trust the company, and really understand what you're actually purchasing.
Yeah, very well said. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next myth then. So this one's interesting. When I was new to the crypto space, I definitely fell into this belief, and it's that my investments are safe with a centralized exchange. So, I came from the banking world and, used to, sorry, my Alexa is trying to speak to me in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm going to keep going and hope it shuts up in a second. For that reason, I suppose I was used to trusting in centralized entities. And I kind of was of the view that, depositing with Binance, Coinbase, the bigger players, they were probably more trustworthy and capable of looking after my assets than I would be taking self-custody, because I was like, well, I might lose my seed phrase, for my self-custody wallet, etc. So there's some truth in that, right? There is risk attached to taking self-custody of your own assets. But let's unpack what are some of the risks that are associated with a centralized exchange. Why is it a myth, spoiler alert, that your investments aren't necessarily safe holding them on a centralized exchange?
I mean, I think the biggest one is just that, you're at the mercy of a company, in terms of all your crypto. Just to go back to the saying, not your keys, not your crypto. Essentially your balances are just a number in their database. It's not like looking in your decentralized wallet and seeing a balance there, right? That's actually your crypto in your wallet that nobody else can, freeze or touch or can. Well, I guess with some coins, I guess they are freezable by the project owners, but that's, obviously smaller cryptos or, smart contract based cryptos. But yeah, I mean, it's really just that, a company can shut down your account. They can, at the government's request, close your account or freeze your account, or just really they can do anything at any time. Or there's other risks as well. I mean, obviously, if with all the problems that we saw last year in terms of, these exchanges going bankrupt or, not really having the funds back that they say that they have backed. Yeah, I mean, it is a true possibility to lose all your assets if they're on an exchange.
Yeah, and the majority don't have, government insurance, as most banks in the Western world at least do. So effectively, it's the case that if they do go bankrupt, then you're an unsecured creditor, and actually through bankruptcy proceedings, you're going to come pretty far down the list, well behind secured creditors. to actually get your funds back, and often it can take years even to get a fraction of what was owed. So that's definitely something a lot of people aren't aware of. It's there, it's buried in the terms and conditions for the likes of Coinbase, but it's certainly not something that a lot of people appreciate.
I think that's a good point, because at face value, you could say, yeah, but isn't that how banks work? And when you deposit money, they have it. It's under their custody. But if something goes wrong, they usually have insurance. There's a lot more regulation around it, which isn't a whole other thing, regulation. But also worth noting, and Aaron kind of touched on this, but even companies that aren't like FTX that had bad intentions, sometimes possibly arguably Terra Luna, some say that was kind of an attack. Things can happen, and even with best intentions, government can come and shut down accounts. They can choose. It depends on the place, but when there is centralization, not your keys, not your crypto. I think that really says it best.
Well, you just made me remember another one too. They can always get hacked, right? So they're generally holding crypto in a couple, cold wallets or whatever it might be, but that's all their users' cryptos, typically would be within a couple different wallets, and
much bigger bullseye.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, not a lot, but I mean, there's been some major hacks in the past. Just
when you also. There's been ones where you found out that the hacks were not actually hacks. So owners were just, withdrawing users' funds and then saying they got hacked. But that's when we go back to crypto being traceable. People could do all the research to say, wait a minute, these all went to these personal wallets here. This wasn't hacked at all, right? So that's one advantage again to crypto. But yeah, there definitely are exchanges that did get hacked.
There's one that comes to mind. It was in terms of the anonymous aspect. I think it was the BitConnect Bitcoin that were stolen. There was like a couple that was living in New York that had, I forget exactly how many it was. It was, tens of thousands of Bitcoins, I believe. And they didn't touch it for years just because they knew that people were just like watching those wallets like a hawk. But eventually they had to, I guess, touch it a little bit. And almost right away they were caught. Like as soon as they did any transfers, right?
So.
Yeah. Wow. But I guess, we can't ignore the fact that centralized exchanges do provide benefits, right? I mean, they're incredibly easy to use, and at the moment, there aren't really a load of obvious alternatives to get started in crypto. And clearly, that's one of the things that we're heavily focused on here at On Money. How do we allow people to get into the world of decentralized finance and have self-custody of their assets, but with the ease of use that everyone's come to expect in the Web2 world and with the likes of the centralized exchanges. And we're doing that through our mobile app, where basically you'll be able to easily set up a Web3 wallet in seconds. You'll be able to onboard via crypto in just a couple of minutes, and then you'll be able to earn high but sustainable yield on your crypto. So obviously today's video isn't to go into the detail of that, but if you head to bomb.app, you'll find out more information there. And make sure to follow our socials, because we'll be putting a really big focus on that in the coming weeks and months, and have some really generous referral incentives for everyone that's getting involved too.
Yeah, because there are risks to self-custody as well, right? I mean, as you mentioned earlier, if you lose your seed phrase, or if someone else gets a hold of your seed phrase, that's a problem as well. And we are addressing that as well with our app, with the Taurus wallet integration that we have. So kind of to give people the ease of use and kind of recovery aspects that you'd have with a centralized exchange, but without the centralization. So we'll share more about that with you guys soon. But basically,
I had in the past. I was reading an article the other day, and you had mentioned it in one of our past AMAs, talking about some of the risks, talking about a wrench attack, where somebody actually
$5 wrench attack.
Yeah. So that's if you do have your keys, there are some risks. There are many ways to mitigate those risks, but yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of that, that's actually the reason why I bought a Trezor at first instead of a Ledger, just because Ledger had the that data breach. And I was like, oh, well, if they did it once, it's like the last thing in the world you want is everyone knowing where the addresses of everyone that owns a Ledger.
Yeah, I personally keep my seed phrase in a safety deposit box in a bank, and so I actually don't even know one word that is in my recovery phrase. So if somebody came to like my house to try and find it and try and beat it out of me, I honestly wouldn't be able to provide any info. So
Can't help you, bud.
yeah,
your Ledger's there though.
The Ledger is it is here.
We'll not get into Marcus's. I mean, the decentralization maxis will be furious that you're depending on a bank for that. But
if only the bank knew what was being stored there, they'd be offended.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, we're obviously big believers in the benefits of decentralization and self-custody. But we like a lot of what centralized exchanges do in terms of the ease of use that they provide. So we're very much focused on harnessing all of that, but providing the benefits of decentralization.
Yeah, I like using centralized exchange, just get some crypto and then move it off onto my wallets, or vice versa. So I've got crypto, I want to pay off a bill. I get on the centralized exchange, convert it to Canadian dollars, and then pay off bills or whatever, right? And that's pretty much the only use I have for centralized exchange now. I did used to have like staking on there, and I used to hold significant amounts on there, which now reflecting is pretty scary because of some of the exchanges that have just completely collapsed and everyone's lost every dollar that they've had on there. So I would not recommend whatever amount's comfortable for you. But I always say, like, once you get over $5,000 holding in an exchange, you should probably start figuring out ways to get that into self-custody.
Yeah, I think, totally. I think that's probably a good rule of thumb. It's really any time you get into an amount that you kind of care about, right? Because there's the whole concept of don't invest more than what you can afford to lose. And I think that's absolutely true, right? You should never invest more than, if you lost that money and you genuinely couldn't live, then you've invested too much, right? That's the reality. But it does get to a point where you've invested enough that, you would really care about it. If you lost it, it would have some impact on your life. And that's what you need to ask yourself. Am I at that point? And if so, you really need to be thinking about the safekeeping of your assets and therefore self-custody.
Yeah, I had it was like $4,000 or $5,000 worth of Bitcoin on Binance. And then just one morning I woke up and I wasn't able to do anything with it other than withdraw it because the government in my province decided that we can no longer use Binance. And so that's part of the problem with centralized exchanges. The government can actually tell you, sorry, you can no longer use this service. And I just wasn't allowed to. So I had to, luckily the one thing they gave you 6 months to withdraw Bitcoin, but I couldn't trade it. If I didn't want Bitcoin, I couldn't add more. I couldn't buy, I couldn't do anything. The only thing I could do was withdraw. And still now the 6 months is up and I can log into my account and I have like about $12 worth of Bitcoin on there that I can just never get out. It's not a lot, but it's just annoying that it's just stuck there and I'll never be able to get it.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, one day I'm sure that'll be a lot more than $12. That's for sure. So
I'm sure it'll be more frustrating.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's move on to our final myth. And just a reminder, by the way, for anyone that's with us live, if you've got any questions or comments about anything that we're talking about or have myths that you want us to discuss, then definitely just pop those in the chat. But yeah, the final one that we've got is that crypto is bad for the environment. And I think this is largely people suggesting that's the case around Bitcoin with its proof of work consensus mechanism. But yeah, let's unpack it. What do we think? Is that a myth or not?
I mean, there's no question that there are, greenhouse gas that are going into the environment due to, crypto mining. I think just when you compare it to other significant, emitters of pollution, it's really insignificant. I forget the exact comparison that I heard, but it's something along the lines of it's the equivalent of a rounding error in some other, industries that, are big polluters, right? That's all of crypto's, emissions would be a rounding error, right? So it's really not a significant amount.
Yeah, and it's significantly less than gaming. I'm sure I read something that is significantly less than Christmas tree lights. It's crazy. Again, don't quote me on that. It's certainly the case for gaming. But yeah, comparing it to gold mining, comparing it to banking, etc., is a fraction of all of that. And I think it's around 60% of all energy used for Bitcoin mining is now from the renewable source. That was the most recent stat that I saw, 59-60%. So definitely on the right trajectory.
Yeah, exactly. As crypto is becoming more popular, that was becoming a major concern, especially for governments. They didn't want their countries being known as crypto polluters. So they started making large mining companies, like you're saying, start committing to renewable energy sources for their mining operations. But yeah, I ran a mining rig just of my own, obviously not a big warehouse or anything, but just having like 40 video cards running in the basement. And it is pretty crazy how much energy that consumed and how much heat that produced. In the winter, it would heat almost my entire house just from running these rigs in the basement. I would just kind of vent it so that the heat would come up. And I mean, then I'm not paying for heating, but if I multiplied that by what you'd see in a warehouse where they've got thousands and thousands of these running, I can't imagine how hot it is in there and the energy that it would take. So I do understand the need for switching to renewable sources because it was terrible for the environment. But one of the big shifts recently was Ethereum going from proof of work to proof of stake, and they've reduced their carbon footprint by over 99% just from that one move. So there is a lot of people thinking about this in crypto and understanding the damage that they were doing and making it more sustainable for the future.
It's often not fair comparisons, though. Sometimes, if you look at it, Robin mentioned, if you compare it to banking, some of these are, we're trying to replace certain aspects of banking. And if you're able to shut down even 5% of, all banks and all the people commuting to get to those banks and the lights and the energy that need to power those places, it's still, I'm sure, a fraction. I don't have any stats, but I mean, that's crazy. Yes, it takes energy, but I mean, everything does. So it's often not fair comparisons.
Well, that, and I guess, Bitcoin dominance is around 43% at the moment, right? The rest of the crypto market cap, obviously there'll be some other proof of work coins in there. And again, I don't know the stats, but a high proportion of that 57% is going to be from, coins that have consensus mechanisms other than proof of work. And then, so I think people, again, forget that crypto as a sector is much larger than just Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think just in general, everything was proof of work previously, and now it's just, it's the norm to kind of, if you're starting a chain, you're going to go proof of stake. It's, it's, I don't know any recent chains that have launched with proof of work. Well, I'm sure there are some, but I'm not aware of any of them.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think in terms of, is it a myth that crypto is bad for the environment? I mean, there's absolutely some truth in that, but as we've said, it's definitely overstated, I think, generally. And as we said, good trajectory in terms of becoming better for the environment through transitioning to proof of stake and through increased use of renewables for remaining proof of work networks. Cool. So that's the end of our, I guess, list that we've gone into this with. But I'm just checking the comments. Doesn't look like we've got anything coming in for others that people want us to discuss. But before we wrap up, have you guys got any other myths that you want to talk about?
Well, it's not a myth, but just a slight tangent. Have you guys been following Ethereum proof of work, like the fork that stayed proof of work? Like, is that even?
Not much.
Is that even a thing right now? Or?
Ethereum Classic.
Not a classic. That's been around for a while.
I know, but they continued on proof of work though, and you could still mine it. I don't
Yeah.
know what
Okay.
the other
Now
one
there's
is.
an actual like Ethereum proof of work.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's like a
I've got
recent.
my fraction, my tiny Ethereum proof of work coins that have like 0 value, but beyond that, I have to admit I've not massively been keeping up in terms of the volume of on-chain activity that there
I
is.
was pretty impressed though. Like I noticed that like if you had like Ethereum in your Binance Smart Chain wallet, like they actually would have issued you like Ethereum proof of work, like a wrapped version of that as well, right? So it's I'm assuming that they did that on a majority of networks that have wrapped Ethereum. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
I mean, I didn't get any, but I did notice it. I'm glad it.
Yeah, that's what my tiny amount came
It's
from.
on BSC.
It was on Binance, so they
on Binance. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's literally pennies because I had basically 0 ETH because as we were talking about, I don't use centralized exchanges to store assets.
Okay, so the symbol's ETH. Let's see what it's looking like.
Yeah.
$3.
Yeah, I should probably educate myself in all honesty about the extent, that's actually a thing. I don't know a huge amount about it.
I don't know how big of a thing it is. It's probably going to 0.
Yeah, that could well be the case. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's been a really good discussion. So we'll get ourselves wrapped up. Just a reminder, though, if you've got any comments, if you're watching this back about things you'd like to hear us talk about, or any thoughts on stuff we talked about today, drop it in the comments. We'll make sure to come back to you or talk about it in future videos. We're really focused through these YouTube videos and through our regular Twitter spaces, basically just helping people get their head around crypto. We recognize that it's a complex space, and we're always open to ideas on what we should be talking about. So do let us know. We've got awesome communities and Telegram and Discord, so feel free to come along there and you can ask us questions. And if you're not already, definitely follow us on Twitter as well. And then final ask, if you haven't already, just hit the like button. It's always a big help for us. And if you're not, then do subscribe because we do these videos weekly. So there'll be lots more like them coming.
And we'll also have these cut up into little 1-minute segments. So if you want to come back in a couple days, check out our list of shorts, or you can follow us on TikTok and you'll see a bunch of, if you don't want to go through the full hour here, just find the topics you like and you'll be able to see the little 1-minute beautiful pieces of advice from Mr. Rob, Aaron, and Simon.
And yourself.
Yeah,
and
yourself,
as well. Yeah, totally. Yeah, great stuff. But no, thanks again to everyone that's come along. Thanks to everyone watching back, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Have a great day, everyone.